The champagne glass hit the mahogany table with a sharp clink that cut through the restaurant's ambient noise. Howard Gold, my father-in-law, stood up with the kind of theatrical flourish that came naturally to a man who'd spent 30 years on the bench as a circuit court judge. His silver hair caught the chandelier light as he cleared his throat, commanding attention from our entire table. "Drake," he said, his voice carrying that familiar tone of condescending authority, "we need to discuss your future with this family." I looked up from my untouched prime rib, already knowing this conversation wouldn't end well. Lana sat beside me, her manicured fingers wrapped around her wine glass, avoiding my eyes. Across the table, Franklin Ormsby, Howard's old golf buddy and owner of 3 used car lots, leaned back in his chair with a smirk that made my stomach turn. "What kind of discussion?" I asked, though the sick feeling in my gut told me I already knew. Howard's smile was razor thin. "The kind where we tell you that we're going to replace you with someone else. You're too old to be useful anymore, Drake. 42, no real prospects, still tinkering with computers like some teenager in his basement." The words hit me like a physical blow. I turned to Lana, waiting for her to defend me, to tell her father he was out of line. Instead, she met my gaze with those cold blue eyes and nodded once, deliberate and final. "I agree with Daddy," she said quietly. "It's time for a change." The restaurant noise faded to a dull roar in my ears. Around our table, the other dinner guests, Lana's country club friends, Howard's business associates, watched with barely concealed anticipation. This wasn't a spontaneous decision. This was a performance, carefully orchestrated for maximum humiliation. Franklin leaned forward, his gold tooth glinting. "Nothing personal, Drake. Just business." I sat there for a moment, processing the magnitude of what had just happened. 12 years of marriage, reduced to a corporate restructuring announcement over dinner, the woman I'd built a life with, the house I'd renovated with my own hands, the joint accounts I'd filled with money from my IT consulting business. All of it suddenly felt like borrowed time. "Well," I said, surprised by how steady my voice sounded, "I guess that's that." I stood up slowly, pulled my wallet from my jacket, and dropped 3 20s on the table. "Happy New Year, everyone." As I walked toward the exit, I heard Lana's laugh, bright and artificial, followed by Franklin's voice saying something about finally getting this sorted out. The hostess wished me a good evening, oblivious to the fact that my world had just imploded in the middle of her restaurant. Outside, the December air bit through my dress shirt. I'd left my coat at the table, but going back wasn't an option. The valet brought my truck around, a 10-year-old Ford that Lana constantly complained about, and I tipped him with the last bill in my wallet. The drive home took 15 minutes through the empty streets of our mid-sized Michigan city, past the abandoned storefronts downtown, through the gentrified district where young professionals lived in converted warehouses, and finally into Riverside Estates, where Lana and I had bought our dream house 5 years ago. The house sat dark at the end of our cul-de-sac, all glass and steel angles that Lana had insisted on. Modern, she'd called it. Sophisticated. I'd always thought it looked cold, but I'd written the checks anyway. I parked in the driveway and sat for a moment, staring at the structure I'd helped design and finance. The smart home system I'd installed myself blinked its status lights at me through the front windows. Security cameras, automated locks, climate control, entertainment systems, all of it networked and controlled through my personal server in the basement. My phone buzzed, a text from Lana. "Don't wait up, celebrating with friends." I laughed, a short bark of sound in the empty truck cab. Celebrating. Of course she was. Inside, the house felt different. The same furniture, the same artwork Lana had chosen, but the atmosphere had shifted. This wasn't my home anymore. According to my wife and her family, I was just a temporary occupant who'd overstayed his welcome. I poured myself 3 fingers of bourbon and sat down at my home office computer. If they wanted to play games, I could play games. But first, I needed to understand exactly what I was dealing with. Lana had left her phone on the kitchen counter, unusual for her, since she was normally glued to the device. I picked it up and found it unlocked, another oddity. Either she was getting careless, or she wanted me to see something. The text messages told the whole story. Months of planning between Lana, Franklin, and Howard. Financial arrangements, timeline discussions, even conversations about how to manage Drake's transition out. They'd been orchestrating this for half a year, maybe longer. The most recent thread between Lana and Franklin made my hands shake with rage. Can't wait till he's finally gone. Soon, baby. Dad's got everything arranged. Think he suspects? Doesn't matter. Too late now. I scrolled through dozens of similar exchanges, each one driving the knife deeper. They discussed my weaknesses, my financial contributions, even my daily routines. Franklin had been coming to the house regularly while I was at client sites. My wife had been planning my replacement like a corporate merger. But the worst part wasn't the betrayal itself. It was the casual contempt in their messages, the way they discussed me like a problem to be solved rather than a person to be respected. 12 years reduced to logistics and inconvenience. I copied every message, every photo, every document I could find on Lana's phone. Then I moved to our shared computer, accessing email accounts and cloud storage with passwords I'd set up myself years ago. More evidence of their planning, including financial projections that showed how they intended to divide our assets. The house security system was next. I'd installed it myself, with cameras covering every entrance and most of the interior common areas. The footage from the past 6 months painted a clear picture of Franklin's visits, including several instances where he'd obviously spent the night. By 3 a.m, I had everything: bank records, communication logs, security footage, financial documents, a complete record of their conspiracy against me. They'd been careful, but not careful enough to account for the fact that I controlled most of the technology they'd used to plan their betrayal. I uploaded everything to a secure cloud server, then created multiple backup copies on encrypted drives. Whatever happened next, I wanted documentation. Lana came home at dawn, stumbling slightly as she kicked off her heels in the foyer. She found me in the kitchen, drinking coffee and reading the newspaper like nothing had happened. "You're up early," she said, avoiding my eyes as she headed for the coffee maker. "Never went to sleep," I replied. "Interesting night." She paused, something in my tone making her look at me directly for the first time since dinner. "Drake, about last night." "About last night," I interrupted. "I think we need to have a conversation about expectations." Her face went pale. "What do you mean?" I smiled, the expression feeling foreign on my face. "I mean, if you're planning to replace me, you should probably make sure you understand what you're replacing." Lana's coffee cup rattled against the granite countertop as she set it down. "I don't know what you're talking about." "Sure you do." I folded the newspaper and stood up, moving to the kitchen island that separated us. "Franklin's been here 17 times in the past 3 months. The security system logs every entry, Lana, every single one." Her face went from pale to flushed in seconds. "You've been spying on me?" "I've been monitoring my own house. There's a difference." I pulled out my phone and showed her the screen. "Want to see the footage? Franklin's got a very distinctive way of walking, especially when he's carrying overnight bags." She backed against the sink, her hands gripping the edge of the counter. "You can't. This is harassment." "This is documentation, and before you start planning your next move, you should know that I spent last night making copies of everything. Your text messages, the financial planning documents, even that charming conversation where you and Franklin discussed the best way to manage my transition out." Lana's mouth opened and closed without sound. I'd never seen her speechless before, and I had to admit it was satisfying. "Here's what's going to happen," I continued, my voice calm and reasonable. "You're going to sit down at this table, and we're going to discuss the terms of our separation like adults, or you can keep lying, and I'll start sharing some very interesting videos with your friends at the country club." She sank into one of the kitchen chairs, her perfect composure finally cracking. "What do you want?" "I want honesty. How long has this been going on?" 6 months? Her voice was barely a whisper. "And the plan was to what, exactly? Have me voluntarily walk away so you and Franklin could move in here?" She nodded, unable to meet my eyes. "Whose idea was it? Yours, Franklin's, or Daddy's?" "Daddy suggested it first, but Franklin and we'd been talking." "Talking." I laughed, short and bitter. "Is that what we're calling it?" "Drake, please. This doesn't have to be ugly." "It became ugly the moment you decided to humiliate me in public instead of asking for a divorce like a grown-up." I sat down across from her, leaning forward. "But you're right about one thing. This doesn't have to get worse than it already is." Hope flickered in her eyes. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying I'm not going to make this easy for you. You want me out? Fine, but you're going to have to work for it." I pulled out my laptop and opened a legal document I'd drafted while she was out celebrating. "Property freeze filed electronically at 4 this morning. This house is now under legal review pending resolution of marital disputes. Nobody moves in, nobody moves out, nobody changes anything until a judge says otherwise." Lana stared at the screen. "You can't do that." "I can, and I did. Remember that clause I insisted on when we bought this place? The one your lawyer said was unnecessary? Turns out it was very necessary." Her phone buzzed on the counter. She glanced at it, and I saw Franklin's name on the display. "Go ahead, answer it. Tell him the good news." She picked up the phone with shaking hands. "Hello?" I could hear Franklin's voice through the speaker, loud and confident. "Morning, beautiful. Ready to start our new life?" Lana looked at me, panic in her eyes. "Franklin, we need to talk." "Talk? What's wrong? Did something happen with Drake?" "He knows. About everything." The silence on the other end stretched for several seconds. When Franklin spoke again, his voice had changed. "What do you mean, he knows? He has recordings, pictures, text messages, everything. That little piece of—" Franklin caught himself. "Put him on the phone." Lana held out the phone to me. I shook my head. "He won't talk to you," she said. "Then you tell him this. He's got 24 hours to pack his things and get out. After that, things get complicated." I took the phone from Lana's hand. "Franklin, this is Drake." "You son of a—" "Careful," I interrupted. "I'm recording this conversation, along with all the others." Another pause. "What do you want?" "I want you to understand something very clearly. This is my house. These are my security systems. This is my network, my server, my everything. You've been playing games in my playground, and now it's my turn." "You think you can threaten me?" "I think I can document everything you've done and let the consequences speak for themselves. Your choice how this goes, Franklin. But either way, you're not moving into my house." I hung up and handed the phone back to Lana. She was crying now, mascara running down her cheeks in black streams. "This is crazy," she whispered. "You're acting crazy." "I'm acting rational. For the first time in months, maybe years. You want to know what crazy looks like?" I opened another folder on my laptop. Crazy looks like spending 6 months planning to destroy someone's life instead of just asking for a divorce. "We never meant to hurt you. You meant to erase me. There's a difference." I closed the laptop and stood up. "I'm going to work. When I get back tonight, I expect Franklin's key to be on this counter. The spare key, the garage door remote, and anything else you gave him." "And if I don't?" "Then tomorrow morning, your father's going to wake up to some very interesting emails in his inbox, along with everyone else in your contact list." I left her sitting at the kitchen table, staring at her hands. Outside, the morning sun was burning off the frost on my truck's windshield. For the first time in months, I felt like I could breathe again. The drive to my office took me through the old downtown district, past the empty storefronts and boarded-up buildings that told the story of our city's slow decline. But this morning, even the urban decay looked different. Less like failure, more like opportunity. My office was in a converted warehouse on the edge of the business district, a space I'd chosen for its cheap rent and reliable internet connection. 3 other small businesses shared the building, a graphic design firm, an accounting practice, and a private security company called Torwyn Solutions. I'd exchanged pleasantries with the security company's owner a few times in the hallway, a young woman named Meira who seemed too sharp and professional for such a small operation. But this morning, as I climbed the stairs to my second-floor office, I found her waiting by my door. "Mr. Torwyn? Could I speak with you for a moment?" She was maybe 25, with dark hair pulled back in a professional ponytail and eyes that seemed to take in everything at once. Her handshake was firm, confident. "What can I do for you, Miss—" "Torwyn, Meira Torwyn. I run the security firm downstairs." She gestured toward my office door. "Mind if we talk privately?" Inside, she declined my offer of coffee and got straight to the point. "I heard about your situation last night." I frowned. "I'm sorry?" "Your wife's father, Judge Howard Gold. The announcement at Riverside Country Club." She smiled at my expression. "I have clients who were at the restaurant. Word travels fast in a small city." "And you're telling me this because—" "Because I think you might need some professional assistance, the kind that someone in my line of work can provide." I leaned back in my chair, studying her face. "What kind of assistance?" "The kind that helps level playing fields. Judge Gold has connections, resources, influence. Franklin Ormsby has money and a reputation for playing dirty. Your wife has social standing and family backing." She paused. "What do you have?" "Evidence, documentation, and apparently a very good security system. That's a start, but it won't be enough if they decide to escalate." "What makes you think they'll escalate?" Meira pulled out her phone and showed me a text message. "Because Franklin Ormsby just hired a private investigator to dig up dirt on you. And your father-in-law made some calls this morning about expediting certain legal proceedings." The message was time-stamped 20 minutes ago. My stomach dropped as I read the details. "How did you—" "I told you, I'm in the security business. Information is what I do." She put her phone away. "The question is, do you want to stay ahead of this, or do you want to keep reacting?" I looked out my office window at the city below, thinking about Lana's tears and Franklin's threats and Howard's condescending smile. They thought they were dealing with a broken man who would quietly disappear when pushed. They were about to learn otherwise. What did you have in mind? Meira's plan was elegant in its simplicity. While Lana, Franklin, and Howard focused on their legal and financial maneuvers, we would systematically dismantle their ability to execute them, not through illegal means, but through the careful application of information, timing, and leverage. The key, she explained as we sat in her office that afternoon, is understanding that they're operating on assumptions. They assume you're passive. They assume you don't have resources. They assume you'll play by their rules. Her office was a study in controlled efficiency. Multiple monitors displayed various data feeds, and a wall of filing cabinets suggested extensive research capabilities. This wasn't some small-time security outfit. This was a serious intelligence operation. What's your background? I asked. This seems like more than standard private security work. Corporate intelligence, mostly. Industrial espionage prevention, executive protection, that kind of thing. She pulled up a file on her computer. But I've handled domestic situations before, usually when one party has significant advantages over the other. And you think that's what this is? I think Judge Gold has spent 30 years building a network of favors and obligations. Franklin Ormsby has spent 20 years cutting corners and buying influence. Your wife has spent her adult life learning how to manipulate social situations. Meira turned the monitor so I could see it. Against all that, you have technical skills and righteous anger. It's not a fair fight. The screen showed a detailed breakdown of Howard Gold's financial interests, Franklin's business dealings, and even Lana's social connections. The depth of research was staggering. How did you compile all this? Public records, mostly. Property transactions, business filings, court documents. It's amazing what people don't realize is accessible if you know where to look. She clicked through several documents. For instance, did you know that Franklin's main car lot is 3 months behind on its lease payments? Or that your father-in-law has been quietly liquidating assets for the past year? I stared at the financial data. What does that mean? It means they're not operating from a position of strength. They're operating from desperation. Meira pulled up another file. Judge Gold's retirement investments took a major hit in the last market correction. He's been looking for ways to recoup those losses. Franklin's business is struggling because of increased competition from the big chain dealers. And your wife? She hesitated. What about my wife? Your wife has been living beyond her means for years. Credit cards, personal loans, even some gambling debts. She needs your income more than she's willing to admit. The pieces started falling into place. This wasn't just about Lana wanting a new husband. This was about money, status, and survival. They needed me gone not because I was useless, but because I was in the way of their financial recovery plan. So what do? We accelerate their timeline, force them to make moves before they're ready. Meira opened a new document, starting with Franklin's business problems. The plan she outlined was sophisticated but legal. Using public records and social media, we would document Franklin's business practices and share that information with relevant authorities and customers. Not false accusations, just facts presented in the right context at the right time. The car business depends on reputation and financing, Meira explained. If customers start questioning his integrity, and if lenders start reviewing his loan portfolio, he'll have bigger problems than your wife. That seems ruthless. It's proportional response. He's trying to steal your house and your wife. I'm suggesting we point out that he's not exactly a reliable business partner. She had a point. Franklin had inserted himself into my marriage with the goal of destroying it. If his own business practices couldn't withstand scrutiny, that was his problem, not mine. What about Howard and Lana? Different approaches for different targets. Judge Gold's reputation depends on the appearance of propriety. If his involvement in this situation becomes public knowledge, it could be embarrassing. And your wife's social standing is built on image management. If that image gets complicated... I was beginning to understand why Meira's security firm commanded high-end clients. This wasn't just about cameras and alarm systems. This was about understanding human psychology and systemic vulnerabilities. How much is this going to cost me? Consider it a professional courtesy. I have my own reasons for wanting to see this situation resolved properly. Something in her tone suggested there was more to her interest than professional ethics, but I didn't push. Everyone had their motivations, and right now, hers aligned with mine. We spent the rest of the afternoon developing a comprehensive strategy. By the time I left her office, I had a timeline, a set of specific actions, and most importantly, a sense that I wasn't fighting this battle alone. The drive home took me past Franklin's main car lot, a sprawling collection of used vehicles arranged under bright fluorescent lights. The sign advertised Honest Frank's Honest Deals, which struck me as the kind of slogan that protested too much. As I pulled into my driveway, I noticed Lana's car wasn't there. A note on the kitchen counter explained her absence. "Staying at Daddy's tonight. Need time to think." I crumpled the note and tossed it in the trash. Thinking time was over. Action time had begun. My first call was to the State Attorney General's Consumer Protection Division. As a concerned citizen, I wanted to report some questionable business practices I'd observed at a local car dealership. Nothing specific, just a request that they review recent customer complaints and financing arrangements. The second call was to the local newspaper's business reporter. I had some interesting public records about commercial real estate transactions that might make for a good story about the challenges facing small businesses in our changing economy. The third call was to my own lawyer, a straight-talking woman named Patricia Chen, who'd handled the legal work when Lana and I bought our house. I needed to understand my options if this situation escalated beyond property freezes and documentation. "Drake," she said after I'd explained the situation, "I have to ask, are you sure you want to fight this? Sometimes the cleanest solution is just to negotiate a settlement and move on." "I'm sure. They had 6 months to plan this. I deserve at least that long to respond." "Fair enough, but be careful about the methods you use. Documentation and legal filings are one thing. Harassment and intimidation are something else entirely." "I understand." "Do you? Because from what you're describing, your wife's family has resources and connections. If this turns into a public battle, they might have advantages you haven't considered." Patricia was right to be cautious, but she didn't know about Meira's research or the vulnerabilities we'd identified. Sometimes the best defense was a carefully planned offense. That evening, I sat in my home office reviewing the security footage from the past 6 months, watching Franklin come and go from my house, seeing him and Lana together in my living room, observing the casual way they'd made themselves comfortable in my space. It was infuriating and motivating in equal measure. But it was also educational. Their body language, their routines, their obvious comfort with deception, all of it told me something important about the people I was dealing with. They weren't just unfaithful, they were calculating. This wasn't a crime of passion, it was a crime of planning. My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "Heard you had an interesting conversation with my girlfriend today. We should talk. Franklin." I stared at the message for a moment, then deleted it without responding. If Franklin wanted to talk, he could come to my house and ring the doorbell like a civilized human being. But somehow, I doubted he'd choose that approach. 20 minutes later, my security system alerted me to movement in the driveway. Franklin's pickup truck sat at the end of my walkway, engine running, headlights pointed at my front windows. He was just sitting there, making his presence known. I watched him through the camera feed for several minutes. He seemed to be waiting for me to come outside to engage with him on his terms. Instead, I activated the exterior floodlights and turned on the sprinkler system. The sudden burst of water and light sent him speeding away, but not before the cameras captured clear footage of his license plate and his face. As I uploaded the video to my secure server, I realized that Franklin had just made his first tactical mistake. By coming to my house uninvited, by attempting to intimidate me on my own property, he'd given me exactly the kind of evidence I needed to justify everything that was about to happen to him. Tomorrow, the real counterattack would begin. Franklin's midnight visit turned out to be a gift that kept giving. The security footage showed him not just sitting in my driveway, but actually getting out of his truck and approaching my front door before the sprinklers activated. More importantly, it showed him trying the door handle and peering through windows, clear evidence of attempted trespassing. I filed a police report first thing Tuesday morning, providing the video evidence and requesting that officers document the incident. The desk sergeant was professional but unimpressed until I mentioned that the individual in question was involved in an ongoing domestic dispute and had made verbal threats. "We'll have a patrol car swing by your house a few times today," Officer Martinez assured me, "and we'll have a conversation with Mr. Ormsby about appropriate boundaries." "I appreciate that. I just want this documented in case the situation escalates." Smart thinking. Domestic situations can get complicated fast. From the police station, I drove to my office, where Meira was waiting with updates on our research initiatives. "Franklin's having a very bad morning," she reported with evident satisfaction. The State Consumer Protection Office received 17 separate complaints about his business practices yesterday afternoon. Apparently, several customers decided to share their experiences after reading about similar issues online. "Customers you contacted?" "Customers who were already unhappy but didn't know they had options. Sometimes people just need to be reminded that they have rights." She pulled up a spreadsheet on her computer. "His financing partner is also asking questions about some irregularities in loan documentation." "How do you know that?" "Because the financing partner is one of my clients. They hired me 6 months ago to review their dealer network for compliance issues. Meira smiled. Funny how these things work out. I was beginning to understand that Meira's involvement in this situation wasn't as coincidental as I'd initially assumed, but her motivations could wait. Right now, Franklin's problems were my solutions. What about Howard and Lana? Judge Gold received a courtesy call from the State Judicial Ethics Commission this morning. Someone raised questions about his involvement in private legal matters involving family members. Nothing formal, just a reminder about the appearance of impropriety. And Lana? Your wife's having lunch today with 3 of her closest friends from the country club. They'll be discussing some very interesting rumors about her financial situation and her relationship with Franklin. Meira handed me a printed document. This is a summary of her credit card statements for the past year. Public record, since they're tied to joint accounts with your name on them. The numbers were staggering. Lana had been spending money we didn't have on things we didn't need, apparently financing a lifestyle that our actual income couldn't support. The country club membership, the designer clothes, the expensive dinners, all of it funded by debt that I was legally responsible for. She's been planning to leave me while simultaneously bankrupting me. It's a common strategy. Run up joint debts, then claim them as marital obligations in the divorce settlement. Very effective if the other party doesn't realize what's happening. My phone rang. Lana's name appeared on the display. Drake, we need to talk, right now. I'm at work, Lana, like I am every day. This isn't a joke. Franklin's business is being investigated. Daddy got a call from some ethics commission. People are asking questions about our finances. Her voice was tight with panic. What did you do? I documented everything you've been doing for the past 6 months. The rest is just natural consequences. You can't do this. This is harassment. This is transparency. If you and Franklin and your father don't like people knowing the truth about your behavior, maybe you should have behaved differently. Drake, please. We can work this out. We don't have to destroy each other. We? I laughed. There is no we, Lana. You made that very clear on New Year's Eve. I made a mistake. I was confused, scared about our future, but we can fix this. The only thing that needs fixing is your understanding of consequences. You spent 6 months planning to humiliate and replace me. Now you get to experience what it feels like to have your life turned upside down by someone else's decisions. This is crazy. You're acting like a completely different person. I'm acting like someone who finally understands what he's dealing with and what he's capable of. I hung up and turned to Meira, who had been listening to the conversation with professional interest. She's panicking, Meira observed. That's good. Panic leads to mistakes. What kind of mistakes? The kind where people make desperate choices that make their situations worse. Your wife is used to controlling situations through manipulation and social pressure. When those tools stop working, she'll try more direct approaches. Such as showing up at your office, which should happen in about 20 minutes based on the timeline from her father's house to here. Meira was right. Lana's BMW pulled into the parking lot 18 minutes later, and I watched through my office window as she stormed across the asphalt in heels that were completely inappropriate for the weather. She didn't bother knocking on my office door, just burst in with the kind of dramatic flair she'd perfected over years of getting her way through emotional manipulation. Drake, this has gone far enough. Has it? Because from where I sit, it's just getting started. She was dressed for effect, the kind of outfit that usually made me forget whatever we'd been arguing about. But today, all I could see was the credit card statements and the text messages and the months of calculated deception. People are calling me, asking questions about Franklin, about Daddy, about our marriage. This is humiliating. Now you know how I felt at that restaurant? That was different. That was family business. This is family business, too. The family business of you trying to steal everything I've worked for. Lana sat down in the chair across from my desk, switching from anger to vulnerability in the space of a breath. It was a performance I'd seen dozens of times before, and it had always worked. Not today. Drake, I love you. I know I made mistakes, but we can fix this. We can go to counseling, work through our problems. Which problems would those be? The problem where you've been having an affair for 6 months? The problem where you've been planning to replace me? Or the problem where you've been spending us into bankruptcy without telling me? Her face went pale. How do you know about the credit cards? I know about everything, Lana. The question is, what are you going to do about it? What do you want? Money? The house? Just tell me what you want, and we can make a deal. I want you to understand that actions have consequences. I want Franklin to understand that he can't just take whatever he wants. And I want your father to understand that being a judge doesn't make him immune to public scrutiny. And then what? We all just go our separate ways? Then we see what's left standing when the dust settles. Lana stood up, her composure finally cracking completely. You're destroying everything. Our marriage, our families, our reputations. For what? Revenge? For justice. There's a difference. She left without another word, her heels clicking angrily on the stairs as she descended to the parking lot. Through my window, I watched her sit in her car for several minutes, probably making phone calls to Franklin and her father. Meira appeared in my doorway a few minutes later. How much of that did you hear? Enough. She's going to escalate now. Probably try to turn this into a public sympathy campaign. The wronged wife, the unstable husband, that kind of narrative. Let her try. I've got 6 months of documentation that tells a different story. Documentation is good, but public opinion isn't always logical. If she's smart, she'll try to make you look like the aggressor. Then we'll have to make sure the truth comes out first. Meira nodded approvingly. Now you're thinking strategically. What did you have in mind? I looked out at the city below, thinking about all the ways this situation could unfold. Lana, Franklin, and Howard had spent months planning my downfall. Now it was time to show them what a real plan looked like. I think it's time to go public. Going public required careful orchestration. Meira and I spent Wednesday morning crafting a strategy that would present the facts without making me look vindictive or unstable. The key was letting the evidence speak for itself while maintaining the moral high ground. The story has to be bigger than just a cheating wife, Meira explained as we reviewed our materials. It has to be about abuse of power, financial manipulation, and the consequences of thinking you're above accountability. She was right. Franklin's business practices, Howard's judicial influence, and Lana's financial deception formed a pattern of behavior that went beyond simple adultery. This was about people who believed rules didn't apply to them. Our first move was strategic, a carefully worded complaint to the Better Business Bureau about Franklin's car lot, supported by documentation from multiple customers who had experienced problems with financing and vehicle condition. Nothing false or exaggerated, just facts presented in proper context. The second move was more direct. A letter to the editor of our local newspaper about the importance of judicial ethics and the appearance of impropriety when judges involve themselves in private legal matters. Again, no direct accusations, just general principles illustrated by hypothetical examples that happened to match Howard's recent behavior exactly. The third move was personal. A detailed social media post about the challenges of discovering financial infidelity in a marriage, complete with screenshots of credit card statements and loan applications that showed how one spouse could secretly accumulate debt in both names. You're not mentioning Lana by name, Meira observed as she reviewed my draft post. I don't need to. Anyone who knows us will recognize the situation, and anyone who doesn't know us will still understand the principle. And when she responds, then she'll have to explain why she's responding to a post that doesn't mention her name. The post went live at noon on Wednesday, and the response was immediate. Within an hour, I had dozens of comments from friends, colleagues, and even strangers sharing similar experiences and offering support. More importantly, several local business owners shared stories about questionable practices at certain car dealerships, and a few people mentioned concerns about judicial ethics in our county court system. By evening, the post had been shared over 100 times, and local news outlets were starting to take notice. The business reporter I'd contacted earlier in the week called to ask if I'd be willing to discuss the broader issues of financial transparency in marriage and consumer protection in the used car industry. I'd be happy to discuss those issues, I told her. They're important topics that affect a lot of families in our community. The interview was scheduled for Thursday morning, which gave me Wednesday night to prepare. But as I sat in my home office reviewing my notes, my security system alerted me to activity in the driveway. This time, it wasn't Franklin. It was Howard Gold, climbing out of his Mercedes with the purposeful stride of a man accustomed to intimidating people into compliance. He rang the doorbell like a civilized person, which was more courtesy than Franklin had shown. I opened the door but didn't invite him in. Judge Gold, what brings you to my neighborhood? You know exactly what brings me here, Drake. This nonsense has gone far enough. I'm not sure what you're referring to. Don't play games with me, son. I've been dealing with smart-mouthed defendants for 30 years. You're not nearly as clever as you think you are. I'm not your son, Judge, and I'm not a defendant in your courtroom. I'm a citizen exercising his rights to document and discuss matters of public interest. Howard's face reddened. Public interest? You're destroying reputations over a simple family disagreement. A simple family disagreement? Is that what you call 6 months of planning to defraud me out of my house and my marriage? Lana made a mistake. She's willing to make amends. But this campaign of yours, the complaints, the media attention, the public humiliation, this is vindictive and destructive. This is proportional response to vindictive and destructive behavior. If you don't like the consequences of your actions, you should have considered that before you acted. Howard stepped closer, trying to use his physical presence to intimidate me. It might have worked 6 months ago, when I still respected his position and authority. Today, it just made me angry. You're playing with fire, Drake. I have friends in this city. Judges, prosecutors, business leaders. If you keep pushing this, you might find yourself facing legal problems you can't handle. Are you threatening me, Judge? I'm giving you friendly advice about the realities of how things work in this community. Then let me give you some friendly advice about the realities of how things work in the modern world. Everything you just said is being recorded by my security system. If I start facing mysterious legal problems, that recording will be shared with every media outlet and ethics commission in the state. Howard's eyes widened as he noticed the cameras mounted under my porch eaves. He'd been so focused on intimidating me that he'd forgotten about basic operational security. You think you're very smart, don't you? I think I'm adequately prepared. The question is, are you? He turned and walked back to his Mercedes without another word. But as he drove away, I noticed him making a phone call. Probably to Franklin, possibly to Lana, definitely to someone who was going to be very unhappy about how this conversation had gone. I uploaded the video to my secure server and sent a copy to Meira with a note. Escalation confirmed. Recommend acceleration of timeline. Her response came back within minutes. Agreed. Time for Phase 2. Phase 2, as it turned out, involved a coordinated information release that would make Wednesday's activities look restrained by comparison. Thursday morning's newspaper featured a front-page story about consumer complaints against local car dealers, with Franklin's business prominently mentioned. The business section included an editorial about the importance of judicial ethics and the appearance of impropriety. And the lifestyle section ran a feature story about financial infidelity and the warning signs that spouses should watch for. My interview with the business reporter aired on the local news Thursday evening, focusing on consumer protection and financial transparency. I was careful to speak only in general terms, but the context was clear to anyone who had been following the story. The important thing, I told the reporter, is that people understand they have rights. When someone tries to manipulate you financially, socially, or legally, you don't have to just accept it. You can document what's happening, seek appropriate help, and hold people accountable for their actions. What would you say to someone who's facing a similar situation? I'd say, don't let anyone convince you that you're powerless. Don't let anyone tell you that you should just accept unfair treatment for the sake of keeping the peace. And don't let anyone use their position or connections to intimidate you into giving up your rights. The interview ended with the reporter noting that several local residents had contacted the station with similar stories about financial manipulation and abuse of power, suggesting that these issues were more widespread than many people realized. That evening, as I watched the news coverage from my living room, my phone rang. Lana's name appeared on the display, but when I answered, it was Franklin's voice on the line. You think you're real clever, don't you, Drake? I think I'm adequately resourceful. What can I do for you, Franklin? You can stop this campaign before it gets out of hand. You're hurting innocent people. Define innocent. Lana didn't deserve this public humiliation. She made a mistake, but she doesn't deserve to have her life destroyed. She made a mistake? Franklin, she spent 6 months planning to replace me. That's not a mistake. That's a calculated betrayal. And what about my business? I've got employees, families depending on those jobs. You're destroying livelihoods over a personal grudge. I'm not destroying anything. I'm documenting facts and letting people make informed decisions. If your business can't survive informed consumers, that's a business problem, not a personal problem. This isn't over, Drake. No, it's not, but it's a lot closer to being over than it was a week ago. I hung up and realized that I was actually enjoying this. For the first time in months, maybe years, I felt like I had agency in my own life. Instead of reacting to other people's plans, I was making plans of my own. Instead of being the victim of other people's decisions, I was forcing them to react to mine. My phone buzzed with a text from Meira. Franklin's financing partner just pulled his credit line, effective immediately. Thought you'd want to know. I smiled and poured myself a bourbon. Tomorrow was Friday, which meant the weekend was coming. And if I knew Lana, Franklin, and Howard, they would spend the weekend planning their response to everything that had happened this week. But they were still thinking defensively, still reacting to my moves instead of anticipating them, which meant they were about to walk directly into the trap I'd been preparing since Tuesday. The endgame was approaching, and I was ready for it. Friday morning brought news that Franklin's main car lot had been temporarily shut down pending resolution of financing irregularities and consumer complaints. The notice posted on his gate was brief and bureaucratic, but the effect was devastating. 20 years of business building destroyed in less than a week. Meira called with updates as I drove to work. Franklin's scrambling to find alternative financing, but word has gotten out about his problems. No legitimate lender wants to touch him right now. She paused. He's also been asking around about hiring private security, the kind that specializes in intimidation rather than protection. How worried should I be? Moderately. Desperate people make poor decisions, but you've got documentation of everything, including Judge Gold's threats. If anything happens to you, they'll be the obvious suspects. Comforting thought. It's also effective deterrent. They can't afford to make this situation worse for themselves. I wasn't entirely convinced, but Meira had been right about everything else so far. Still, I made sure to vary my routes and timing, and I kept the security system at home running constantly. The real surprise came Friday afternoon, when Lana showed up at my office again. But this time, she wasn't alone. Franklin was with her, along with a man I didn't recognize. Tall, well-dressed, with the kind of confident bearing that suggested either law enforcement or military background. "Drake," Lana said as they entered my office without invitation. "We need to talk." "Then make an appointment. This is my workplace, not a mediation center." Franklin stepped forward, his face red with anger. "You've destroyed my business. 20 years of work gone because you couldn't handle your wife making a choice." "Your business destroyed itself. I just made sure people had accurate information about your practices." The third man hadn't spoken yet, but his presence was clearly intended to be intimidating. He stood by the door, blocking the exit, while Franklin and Lana positioned themselves in front of my desk. "This is harassment," Lana said. "Stalking. Intentional interference with business relationships. We've consulted with attorneys, Drake. You're looking at serious legal liability." "Have you consulted with attorneys about adultery, fraud, and conspiracy to commit theft? Because those are serious legal issues, too." Franklin slammed his hand on my desk. "Enough games. You're going to call off this campaign, apologize publicly for the false accusations, and compensate me for my business losses. Or things are going to get very unpleasant for you." "Are you threatening me, Franklin?" "I'm explaining reality." I looked at the man by the door, then back at Franklin and Lana. They thought they were cornering me, but they'd actually walked into exactly the situation I'd been hoping for. "Before we continue this conversation," I said, reaching for my phone, "I should mention that this entire interaction is being recorded. Audio and video automatically uploaded to cloud storage." Franklin's eyes narrowed. "You can't record us without consent." "Actually, I can. This is my private office, and there are signs posted downstairs notifying visitors that security recording is in progress. You consented by entering the building." The man by the door spoke for the first time. "Mr. Torwyn, I think there might be some misunderstanding here. We're just trying to have a civilized conversation about resolving this situation." "And you are?" "Tom Bradley. I provide consulting services for Mr. Ormsby." "What kind of consulting services?" "Conflict resolution, negotiation, problem solving." "I see. And what's your background, Mr. Bradley?" "Law enforcement. 20 years with Detroit PD." "Retired?" "Early retirement." I nodded, understanding the subtext. Early retirement from Detroit PD could mean a lot of things, but combined with his current role as Franklin's consultant, it probably didn't mean he'd left the force voluntarily. "Well, Mr. Bradley, I appreciate your interest in conflict resolution, but I'm not sure there's much to resolve here. Mr. Ormsby's business problems are the result of his own practices. My wife's social difficulties are the result of her own choices, and Judge Gold's ethical concerns are the result of his own behavior." "But you're the common factor in all these problems," Lana said. "You're the one who's been spreading information, filing complaints, manipulating the media. I'm the one who's been documenting and sharing facts. If those facts are causing problems for you, perhaps you should have considered that before you created the facts." Franklin leaned forward, his voice dropping to a threatening whisper. "You think you're untouchable because you've got some recordings and some media contacts? But you're not as smart as you think you are, Drake, and you're not as protected as you think you are." "Actually, I think I'm exactly as protected as I think I am. Would you like to test that theory?" Before Franklin could respond, my office door opened and Meira walked in, followed by 2 uniformed police officers. "Gentlemen," she said calmly, "I believe you are trespassing." Officer Martinez, the same sergeant who'd taken my report about Franklin's late-night visit, looked around the room with professional assessment. "Mr. Torwyn, are these individuals here with your permission?" "No, they're not. They entered my office without invitation and have been making threats." "What kind of threats?" Franklin started to object, but I held up my phone. I have the entire conversation recorded, officer. They can speak for themselves. Martinez turned to Franklin, Lana, and Bradley. I'm going to need you folks to step outside while we sort this out. This is ridiculous, Lana protested. We're having a private conversation. In someone else's private office, without their consent, after making statements that could be construed as threatening. Martinez's tone was professional, but firm. Outside, please. As they filed out, Bradley caught my eye and nodded slightly, a gesture that could have meant respect, acknowledgement, or warning. I wasn't sure which, and I didn't particularly care. Meira waited until they were gone, then closed the door. How did you know to call the police? I've been monitoring the situation. When Franklin hired Mr. Bradley and they all showed up here together, it seemed like the kind of situation that might benefit from official oversight. Who is Bradley, really? Former Detroit police detective. Left the force under questionable circumstances involving excessive force and evidence tampering. Now he does freelance work for people who need problems solved without too much attention to legal niceties. And you know this how? Because I ran background checks on everyone involved in this situation, including you, initially, though I'm sure you've figured that out by now. I had suspected as much, but hearing it confirmed was still unsettling. What did your background check tell you about me? That you're exactly who you appear to be. Honest, hardworking, maybe a little naive about how ruthless people can be when their interests are threatened. She smiled. Also that you have some very interesting technical skills that most people underestimate. And that made you want to help me because I have my own reasons for wanting to see Judge Gold, Franklin Ormsby, and their associates held accountable for their behavior. Before I could ask what those reasons were, Officer Martinez returned. Mr. Torwyn, I've spoken with the individuals in question. They've agreed to leave the premises and to limit future contact to written communication through attorneys. I've also advised them that any further attempts at intimidation or harassment will result in formal charges. I appreciate that, officer. I should mention that we've been getting a lot of calls this week about various situations involving these same individuals. Complaints about business practices, concerns about judicial ethics, reports of intimidation, and threats. Martinez looked at me directly. It seems like there's a pattern of behavior that's finally getting the attention it deserves. After the police left, Meira and I sat in my office reviewing what had just happened. They're desperate now, she observed. Bringing in someone like Bradley shows they're willing to escalate beyond legal boundaries. Which means? Which means we need to accelerate our timeline. If we're going to finish this, it needs to be soon, before they do something that forces us to respond defensively. What did you have in mind? Meira pulled out her phone and showed me a text message. Tomorrow night, bus station. Franklin, Lana, and Judge Gold are planning a final confrontation. They think if they can corner you in a public place, they can force you to negotiate. How do you know that? Because I've been monitoring their communications. Judge Gold's phone, Franklin's office line, even Lana's social media messages. She smiled at my expression. All perfectly legal, given that they have been making threats and engaging in harassment. And you want me to go to this confrontation? I want us to go to this confrontation, but not as victims, as people who are finally ready to reveal the whole truth about what's been happening here. What whole truth? Meira's smile turned cold, and for the first time since I'd met her, I saw something dangerous in her expression. The truth about who I really am, and why I've been so interested in helping you destroy these people. Saturday evening at the bus station felt like a scene from a noir film. Harsh fluorescent lights, concrete benches, and the constant background noise of diesel engines and departure announcements. I arrived 15 minutes early, as Meira had suggested, and positioned myself near the main waiting area where security cameras would capture everything that happened. Lana, Franklin, and Howard arrived together, their expensive clothes and confident bearing making them stand out among the usual collection of travelers and late-shift workers. They spotted me immediately and approached with the kind of purposeful stride that suggested they'd rehearsed this confrontation. "Drake," Howard said, his voice carrying the authoritative tone he'd perfected over 30 years on the bench. "It's time to end this nonsense." Judge Gold, Franklin, Lana. I nodded to each of them in turn. Nice evening for a public meeting. "Don't be clever," Franklin snapped. "You've destroyed my business, humiliated my family, and cost me everything I've worked for. This ends tonight." "Does it? And how exactly do you propose to end it?" Lana stepped forward, her expression a calculated mixture of vulnerability and determination. "Drake, we're prepared to make you a very generous offer. Full ownership of the house, no claims on your business assets, and a substantial cash settlement. All you have to do is sign a non-disclosure agreement and issue a public apology for the false accusations." "False accusations? Which accusations were false?" The implications about Franklin's business practices, Howard said. The suggestions about judicial impropriety. The characterization of Lana's behavior as fraudulent rather than simply misguided. I see. And if I don't accept this generous offer, Franklin's face darkened, then you'll discover that you're not as protected as you think you are. There are consequences for destroying people's lives, Drake. Sometimes those consequences are legal, sometimes they're financial, and sometimes... He let the threat hang in the air, his meaning clear without being explicit. Sometimes they're what, Franklin? Sometimes they're personal. That's when Meira stepped out from behind a concrete pillar, her phone in her hand and a smile on her face. Sometimes they're recorded and transmitted live to multiple law enforcement agencies, she said cheerfully. Hello, Daddy. The word hit Howard like a physical blow. His face went white, then red, then white again as he stared at Meira with dawning recognition and horror. Meira? What are you? How did I find you? How did I end up in the same city as you? How did I happen to be in the perfect position to help Drake document your corruption and manipulation? She laughed, the sound sharp and bitter. Did you really think you could abandon a pregnant 17-year-old and never face consequences? Lana looked between Meira and her father, confusion and panic warring on her face. Daddy, who is this woman? She's your half-sister, Howard said quietly, from before I married your mother. Half-sister? Lana's voice rose to a near shriek. You have another daughter? Had, Meira corrected. Past tense, because Judge Howard Gold decided that an inconvenient teenage pregnancy didn't fit with his political ambitions, so he paid my mother to disappear, made sure I was never legally acknowledged, and spent the next 25 years pretending I didn't exist. Franklin was looking back and forth between them like a spectator at a tennis match. What the hell is going on here? What's going on, Meira said, is that I've spent 5 years planning this moment. 5 years building my security business, developing my network of contacts, and waiting for the perfect opportunity to destroy the man who destroyed my mother's life. Your mother? Howard's voice was barely a whisper. Committed suicide when I was 16. Did you know that, Daddy? Did you know that the woman you paid to disappear eventually decided that disappearing permanently was her only option? The bus station around us seemed to fade away as Meira's words hung in the air. Other travelers gave our group a wide berth, sensing the tension without understanding its source. Meira, Howard said, I never meant for that to happen. I was young, scared, trying to protect my career. You were a coward, and you raised another coward. She gestured toward Lana, a woman who thinks she can manipulate and betray people without consequences, just like her father. This is insane, Lana said. Even if what you're saying is true, what does it have to do with my marriage? Your marriage was the perfect opening. When I learned that Judge Gold's daughter was married to a decent man who was being systematically betrayed and manipulated, I saw a chance for poetic justice. Help the wronged party, dismantle those responsible, and finally get my revenge on the man who took my mother from me. Franklin finally found his voice. So this whole thing was a setup? The complaints about my business, the media attention, all of it? The complaints about your business were legitimate. The media attention was deserved. The only thing I did was make sure the right information reached the right people at the right time. Meira's smile was cold and satisfied. Just like I made sure Drake had the resources and support he needed to fight back against your conspiracy. Conspiracy? Howard laughed bitterly. There was no conspiracy. This was a family matter, a private situation that you've turned into a public circus? A family matter? You mean the family matter where you helped your daughter plan to defraud her husband out of his house and his assets? The family matter where you used your judicial connections to expedite legal proceedings? The family matter where you threatened a citizen with legal retaliation for exercising his constitutional rights? Meira held up her phone, and I could see that it was recording everything. Because all of that is documented now. Audio, video, financial records, communication logs. Everything you've done, everything you've said, everything you've planned, it's all preserved and backed up in multiple locations. What do you want? Howard asked, his voice defeated. I want justice. I want accountability. I want you to experience the same helplessness my mother felt when you destroyed her life. Meira's voice was steady, but I could hear the years of pain and anger underneath. I want you to understand that actions have consequences, even when you think you're too powerful to face them. And what about Drake? Lana asked. Was he part of this plan? Drake was exactly what he appeared to be, an honest man being betrayed by people he trusted. The only thing I did was give him the tools and information he needed to fight back effectively. I looked at Meira, finally understanding the full scope of what had been happening. How long have you known about their plan? I've been monitoring Judge Gold's activities for 2 years, waiting for the right opportunity. When I learned about the situation with you and Lana, I realized it was perfect. I could help you and get my revenge at the same time. So I was just a convenient weapon in your war against your father? You were a decent person who deserved better than what they were planning to do to you. The fact that helping you also served my purposes doesn't diminish that. Franklin stepped forward, his face twisted with rage. This is all very touching, but it doesn't change anything. You've destroyed my business based on lies and manipulation. I'm going to sue all of you for everything you're worth. With what money? Meira asked sweetly. Your business is bankrupt, your credit is destroyed, and your reputation is ruined. What lawyer is going to take your case on contingency? I'll find a way. I'll make you pay for this. No, Franklin, you won't. Because in about 30 seconds, the police are going to arrive and arrest you for making terroristic threats, conspiracy to commit fraud, and violation of a restraining order. What restraining order? The one Drake filed yesterday, based on your pattern of harassment and intimidation. The one you violated by coming here tonight. As if summoned by her words, police sirens became audible in the distance, growing louder as they approached the bus station. Howard looked at his daughter, then at Meira, then at me. This isn't over. Yes, it is, I said quietly. It's been over since the moment you decided to announce my replacement at a public dinner. Everything that's happened since then has just been the logical consequence of that decision. The police cars pulled up outside the bus station, their red and blue lights painting the concrete walls in alternating colors. Officer Martinez was the first through the door, followed by 3 other officers I didn't recognize. Mr. Torwyn, we received a report of harassment and violation of a restraining order. That's correct, officer. Mr. Ormsby has been making threats despite being served with a protection order yesterday. Franklin started to protest, but Martinez held up a hand. Sir, you'll have a chance to explain your side at the station. Right now, I need you to place your hands behind your back. As the handcuffs clicked into place, Franklin looked at me with pure hatred. This isn't justice, Drake. This is revenge. Sometimes, I said, they're the same thing. As the police led Franklin away, Howard and Lana stood in the harsh fluorescent light, looking smaller and more vulnerable than I'd ever seen them. The judge who had tried to intimidate me was just an old man who'd finally been held accountable for his choices. The wife who had planned to replace me was just a woman who'd discovered that betrayal had consequences. What happens now? Lana asked quietly. Now you go home to your father's house and figure out how to rebuild your life, I said, just like I had to figure out how to rebuild mine. And us? Our marriage? There is no us, Lana. There hasn't been an us for months. The only difference is that now it's official. She nodded, tears finally starting to flow. I'm sorry, Drake, for all of it. I know you are, but sorry doesn't undo the damage. As they walked away, Meira and I stood alone in the bus station, watching the police cars disappear into the night. So what happens to you now? I asked her. Now I go back to my business and my life, knowing that my mother's memory has been honored and her pain has been acknowledged. And us? This partnership we've had? That depends on you. I helped you because it served my purposes, but I also helped you because you deserved justice. The question is whether you can accept help that came with mixed motives. I thought about everything that had happened, everything I'd learned, everything I'd lost and gained in the past week. I think I can accept it, I said finally. Justice is justice, regardless of why it's delivered. Meira smiled, and for the first time since I'd met her, the expression seemed genuinely warm. Then maybe we can be friends. Real friends, not just allies of convenience? I'd like that. We walked out of the bus station together, into the cold January night. Behind us, the building emptied of travelers and workers, leaving only the echoes of confrontation and the satisfaction of justice finally served. My phone buzzed with a text message from an unknown number. The house is yours. Keys on the kitchen counter, L. I showed the message to Meira, who nodded approvingly. Going home? Yeah, I said, looking up at the stars barely visible through the city's light pollution. I'm going home. For the first time in months, that word meant exactly what it was supposed to mean.